So yeah, I will try to not run too long. Just give a few quick timeline of this small project. So it's not really a official project, but something I started during the Christmas break, basically. And we already had a quick introduction, so this will be the agenda. I will try to give a very brief, very rough timeline of what happened and kind of the things that why I did that and the context for the project, and then of course what it is. And as it turned out, some people started using it, so that's why I will give kind of 2 or 3 examples of applications that are already kind of using this version of the data, which is a reformatting of something the government publishes, but you will see that later. And as I already said in the introduction, I'm originally from Hamburg in Germany. That's why I'm started to work on this German vaccination data. Hopefully in the future expanding that, but for now it's Germany only. But I also work in some geospatial things at CVD with Cardina. So I'm usually interested in this mixture of kind of temporal things and space. So this, I think tickled my interest enough to start working on it in the Christmas break. And what happened is basically in 2020, there were a lot of these hackathons and initiatives and things happening around COVID, which for me was a bit tricky to join because there was many other things going on. So I couldn't really participate in a lot of these. This is just one of these examples by the canton of Zurich, but many other hackathons, as you all know, and probably some of you participated or heard of. I mean, there was EU things, there was in every country, I guess, there was many initiatives around this. The reason I'm picking this out is because in Switzerland specifically, what inspired me at least, was that there were some subnational entities like cantons that started collecting data bottom up. So since the federal government was not providing all the data, there was basically a bit of a movement that started collecting these cantonal published COVID numbers and started aggregating them into combined kind of in a community effort on GitHub, trying to scrape all of these things and provide them in a structured form. And for me, that was very interesting thing happening. And but I as I said, I was not too into all of these initiatives, but I kind of watched them from afar. But then the Christmas break happened and everything, was kind of the second big pause button, I guess. So after March, everyone went into lockdown, where I was trying to transition an architecture office into a home office. And then in the Christmas break, there was maybe a bit of time. And in Germany, at least, that was the start of the vaccination campaign. So basically after Christmas and Boxing Day on the 26th, the first person got vaccinated one day early before the official start, which was on the 27th, basically after the Christmas break. And I didn't really think too much of it. I mean, I was watching, as most people probably. But then I stumbled upon something on the day after, which is that the government was starting to publish the vaccination numbers in a quite detailed way. So they already had state level data with kind of extra indicators on age and reason for vaccination and quite detailed Excel table that they published on their website. I mean, this is a screenshot recently. They added a lot of things afterwards, but already the initial one was quite rich, I think, in terms of what they published, also compared to other countries. But then I checked that and I was like, okay, interesting. But then on the next day, what happened is that they published again. And they published again, but they always replaced the Excel table. So they never kept track of the old ones, and they completely replaced this Excel table with the current day data. And so I was a bit wondering, okay, this is very interesting. And as you can see, these are kind of the things they publish, at least in the beginning. There was many other things added afterwards. But in the beginning, it was mostly the overall vaccinations and kind of split up by, are you getting vaccinated by age or by your profession or your medical indication, or because you're like a resident in a senior residency, etc. But it was replaced. So I was thinking, for me, it would be quite interesting to build a time series or something like that, which could be quite interesting. So why not start logging this basically and just get it every day, reformatted a bit so it's a bit more structured, because as you can see, this is kind of a normal government issued Excel table, so it's not really machine readable, I mean semi. And so I did that. So I started setting up kind of this vaccination scraper, and I checked the table every once in a while if things change and so on. And as you can see, already here in January, they started adding other columns and so on and so on. But other people were starting to get interested, because this is a tweet I got early or end of January, where someone was asking, this is actually a bit more structured than what we can get, and it's also time series, which is what we needed. Can we start using this? Because, and I will come back to this later in one of the applications. So that happened in between. So I was kind of motivated, but what kept happening is these failures, because they kept changing the structure and adding things. So in the end, I did have a bit of a side job going on with keeping up with their new structure and changes. As you can see by now, it has many more columns and these like 3-level headers and, you know, like other tables in the background and so on and so on. So it got quite a bit more complex over time. So the publishing entity, the RKI in Germany, kind of, I guess, adhere to a semi-agile approach to publishing this data, which is on the one hand very positive and very interesting, but it doesn't make it super easy, obviously. But maybe to combine a bit of metadata around this. So I counted a bit, and there were roughly 22 changes I had to make to the actual pipeline processing this. And it's now running for over 12 weeks since the vaccination campaign started. And there were about 9 to 10 major changes to the structure of this Excel table that I had to account for. And I will go into a bit the other parts of this project, which is an API for delivering this for, I don't know, other applications. And I worked on a widget which had like roughly 4 versions of it. So what is this thing that I started there? So in the at the core, it's basically a scraper. So at the core, it's just trying to get this Excel table and parsing it, normalizing it, etc. And the reason I'm on this call is because I always thought of the data package pipelines, which is obviously kind of deprecated now, but at the point it was not so much, because the frictionless framework in Python was still kind of in beta during last year. So I thought, okay, this could be something I run. So I combined the pipeline specification YAML that tries to parse all the stuff with a GitHub action to just run 3 times an hour. So I don't have to really take care of it, and then recommit the code to, or the data to the repository. And the main reason for doing this, as I said before, is to get a historized view of all this publications, which is what I did with one table just showing the daily numbers, and one table having all of them with a timestamp, so you can make a time series out of it. However, as you saw, they changed the structure over the time quite a lot. So I very early did normalization, so kind of a key value structure. So not have like this horizontal view, but more like a vertical one for the tables, so that they could add extra keys in the future, which they did. So that was a good choice in the beginning. And I wanted to have it kind of versioned, so that all the changes both to the code and to the data are, you can, on top, you can kind of go back in time and see when things changed, which is actually quite nice by now to browse through a bit sometimes. Then what helped a lot in this whole process, which is one of the core tenets of Frictionless, is that it always did the whole data validation just out of the box. So I could, I very early got these messages of, okay, this actually is failing because they changed the structure, and I don't have to actively monitor, but this was basically my passive monitor for, okay, I have to adapt something here because actually it's not conforming to what I was thinking anymore. And because sometimes, as you may have seen in the screenshots, they actually changed how the fields are labeled, like they added stars after the Bundesland, and they, I don't know, it was fairly flexible in how they published this table. So having this validation actually helped quite a lot to just see what is breaking and what I need to change. And the thing I added in here, which is something Oleg actually started a while back for us, is just have a very thin API wrapper around it that makes it possible to read the data package and more so its resources rather. So each of its resources as a JSON file so that it can be used in all kinds of smaller applications. And of course, at the core, you can, in the repository, if you open that, you will find a data package where you can see all the resources in it, which at the moment are 5, which I maybe can show here quickly. So currently I do have a file on the population because I was doing some kind of calculations on the quota, so or the ratio rather of how many people are vaccinated. This is the one I was describing, so that's only the current day, like the last published one. The cumulative one for all the days, so this is getting quite big by now. And I added something for debugging, basically, that I just saved more or less the table as it comes from the RKE at some point. That's this for all ones. That I talked about. And the API is very simple. So if you want to play around with it, there's this api.vaccination-tracker.app. It's also on the GitHub repository, the same README, where you can see how you can just request the data in JSON format in this case. But what kept this a bit going over this time, I think, is that people started using it. So one of them is the I think what is translated to SHI accredited doctors, at least that's what DeepL said. But this is an association on the federal level, so semi-government, that is responsible for all the kind of public health doctors. For all the public health doctors in Germany. Sorry. And they were very interested, the person who sent me the tweet in the beginning, in getting this specific vaccination data, not directly from the RKE, which would be the obvious thing to do for them because that's the other government entity. But the way I prepared it was more structured and for them easier to read because they were using kind of more webby tools, right, in there, because what they have is not just this report you see here, this PDF that they publish every week, but they actually were working on this dashboard where they show kind of early indicators and kind of big flashy things, but also kind of these graphs for, you know, historized things like the vaccinations and other things. So it's not just the vaccination data, but for them, this fitted in quite well. So they started using this instead of the official source, which is quite interesting. And I myself and a colleague actually started working on some graphs. So we were interested in this time series, as I said in the beginning. And this is kind of broken at the moment because they changed the keys a bit. But that's something I will want to work on a bit in the future to make these graphs more interesting, to actually show some of the data that is in here, because I think with all the keys they provide, you can actually look at quite detailed stats for indications for so the reasons for vaccination, as well as the spatial kind of distribution throughout the country, et cetera, over time. So that's what I try to preserve with this whole project. And the one thing that I did very early is to work on this small widget. So in iOS, there's an app called Scriptable, where you can write JavaScript basically to make your own small widget. So I just did a small demo at some point, and then someone got very interested and we worked on it a bit. So at the moment it looks something like this. So I will also have to do another iteration here, but it just pulls some of the data from the JSON API and displays it, in this case, just the count from yesterday. So you can kind of see how many people got vaccinated the other day, and also what is the overall ratio in the country. And that's already it. So I was quite fast. But I hope with some of it you got a bit of an impression what this does. It's a bit spread out. So if you want to, you can follow this link here and you will find the slides. So if you want to follow some of the links, feel free to do so.